Hello, today we find ourselves at London City Airport in the BAE 146, and we are going to do a flight to illustrate the use of the nav radios for navigation in the 146. So if we go and jump inside the cockpit, we're ready to take off. So at the end of runway 27 at London City. So we will be using today a combination of the VL mode, which is VOR Lock, and GSL, which is Glideslope Lock. We'll also be using heading mode along the way. We'll be choosing an altitude and arming it and using vertical speed to get to that altitude and to descend back down again. And we will be splitting between nav1 and nav2 using the split control along the way. So we're going to use both radios in concert with each other. So let's go and have a look at the flight map and see what, or flight plan, sorry, and see what we're going to do. So you can see us waiting down here at the entrance to the runway 27 at London City. So we're going to fly out towards, or climb out basically, and during the climb out we will engage autopilot and it will immediately turn right and fly towards Brookman's Park. And we're going to do that by tuning in nav1 to the Brookman's Park frequency, which I'm not sure why that marker is appearing now. It's because we've highlighted it here. 117.50. So let's go and do that in the cockpit and get that ready. So nav1 we want to be, which is over here. The radio for nav1's here, radio for nav2 is over there. Course for nav1 is here, course for nav2 is here. So 117.50. So we're going to change, we can choose to change either the standby or the active frequency in the 146. So 117. So outer knob is the integers, inner knob is the decimals. 117.50. So we should find now that, yeah, this has come alive. So you know if this is alive because the center of the CDI marker will have moved. It's showing we are 16.1 miles away from the VOR station. Now we want to fly a specific heading into it, 351 degrees. So we go and set the course for nav1 to 351 degrees. When we get to there, we can actually work ahead of ourselves. So when we get to Brookman Park, we want to fly on to Barkway. So we can set nav2 ahead of time to 116.25. So same deal, outside ring is the integers, 116.25. So we've got the frequency on nav2 ready. So while the aircraft is flying along on VOR Lock mode, all we will do is switch to nav2 and the aircraft will turn right all on its own. So we are going to fly this route at 7,500 feet. So we'll go and program that in, just to give us some extra work to do with managing the ascent and descent. We will arm that, so when we take off we'll use vertical speed and it will come up towards 7,500 feet. If it is not armed it will climb straight through 7,500 feet. Okay, so we're pretty much ready to go. We can set the modes before we activate autopilot, by the way. So we can say we are going to be using VOR Lock mode, for example, and that will work. Something else you can normally do as a safety measure, we know we're taking off runway 27. So if we go back down and look down here, you can see the actual direction of the runway is 272. So you might want to change the heading bug just as a backup to 272 degrees. So it matches the runway direction. It's just a matter of, you know, safety really, in case we need to go and engage heading mode to make the aircraft fly itself in the runway direction. But we're not going to be using that. We've got VOR Lock switched on, and we've got VOR number 1 selected on the split and a course of 351 to the VOR. Okay, let's come off the parking brake, let's get this show on the road. I'm using live weather and it's a cloudy day, so that actually works for us, so we don't get to cheat at the radio navigation. So we'll be up in the clouds with nothing to see basically. So we're going to roll around onto the runway. We will hold the aircraft on the brakes while we spool up the engines, because it's a short runway here and we need all the speed we can get by the time we rotate. can see London stretched out ahead of us. So we'll just straighten up. Right, so holding the aircraft on the brakes. Full throttle. Wait for the engines to come up and release. And we're rolling.
Speed alive, both sides. 80 knots, cross checked.
Just holding the centre line, there's a bit of a crosswind.
V1. Rotate.
Rotating.
V2.
And gear up. Okay, so now we can, let's go for heading mode instead of VOR lock for the moment. Let's go autopilot on, which we do with a button. This is only an indicator. And then we can go vertical speed, so it's going to maintain our 2,000 feet climb rate that we've got at the moment. We can raise flaps now. So let's go and click the VOR lock button and see what happens. So the aircraft is going to turn right. It's turning towards the 251 degree track. We're going to overshoot, hopefully, slightly, so you'll see it weave to get back onto the track. Descend. Or maybe not.
Descend.
So the reason we're getting an annunciation there is TCAS telling us that there are AI aircraft near us. We'll keep climbing maximum throttle.
Descend.
So TCAS will shut up in a minute once the AI aeroplane is out of our way. So we're climbing on vertical speed mode to an armed altitude of 7,500 feet at 2,000 feet a minute. We're on VOR lock, so the aircraft is flying towards the 351 degree radial into 117.50. So if we zoom out now, you can see that happening. We are flying the 351 radial into Brookman Park at 117.50. So everything is looking good, and we're slowly accelerating. We've got to 250 knots. We don't want to go any faster than that below 10,000 feet, otherwise we'll be breaking aviation laws. So let's try and get the aircraft to hold 250 knots. I'm not going to use the auto throttle today. It's a whole nother subject. It's quite complicated in this aircraft to explain. So it will take a video all of its own. So we're just going to use manual throttle all the way. Okay. We're doing well. So when we get to Brookman's Park, or within a mile or so of it, we will switch to nav2, which is already tuned in to the next VOR station. And the aircraft will turn right, all on its own, as soon as we switch VORs. The other thing we will do as soon as we get to Brookman Park is, Barkway, is to start descending. We're going to do a bit of a trick of when we leave Barkway, we will go into heading mode. So you can see we've just had a sound because we are within 900 feet of our target altitude. So that warning was just to let us know that we're getting there, because we will have to come off the throttle when we level out because the plane will accelerate and we don't want to overspeed. So the plane is starting to level out. Look, the vertical speed is coming down because it's going to level out for 7,500 feet. So we can come back off the throttle a bit. Oh, the sim has frozen, by the way. That's why the needles are all frozen. So there we go, it's just unlocked itself. So the plane is just creeping up that last couple of hundred feet to 7,500, and it's accelerating. We can't see anything, which is great for our navigation. Now you can see on the DME here to the nav1, because we're split is on nav1, we're 3 miles away. So we can see that on the map. We're coming into the VOR. So you've got DME here, distance measuring equipment. So we'll get to 2 miles and we'll switch to nav 2. There we go. And the aircraft is now saying, okay, we need to turn right. Which it is doing. But bizarrely, the course has changed. Oh, did I not change the course? We want 23 degrees. I've completely missed that, look. I didn't program the course we want to be travelling into nav 2. So there we go, as a mistake, just caught it. The reason I noticed that was the CDI was off to one side. So there we go, the aircraft is now closing in on the 23 degree radial to Barkway. That was interesting. So yeah, so a small mistake made there, but we caught it because we weren't seeing what we expected to see on the CDI. So the yellow line is saying the direction to the VOR beacon from where we are. So you can see that's why there's a little diagram of an aeroplane. And the centre of the yellow line is whether you are to the right or left of the line. It's slightly to the right at the moment, which is absolutely right. Look, we are slightly to the right of the line. Let's go and look at our airspeed. We're getting a bit fast.
Descend.
So
Descend.
again, that's
Descend.
TCAS. This is busy airspace, and we're flying without ATC.
Descend.
And over
Descend.
London,
Descend.
that's a recipe for disaster. So I'm just throwing out the air brake, which is where you can hear the noise.
Descend. Descend.
So come back off the air brake.
Descend. Descend. Descend.
There's obviously somebody within 5 miles of us, slightly above us.
Descend.
That's why the
Descend.
vertical speed
Descend.
is kicking off about it. Yeah, it's these two, look. They're slightly above us, they're at 9,500 feet. Or this one is, I should say. So that's what's made the TCAS go mad. TCAS stands for Traffic Collision Avoidance System. And in the 146, it's down here, underneath this, there we go, it's here. So we are on TARA, which means transmit and receive. Okay, so we're flying along, 250 knots, and we are now 5 miles from our next waypoint now. We are going to leave here on a heading. We're not tuning straight into ILS. We're going to leave here on a heading of 75 degrees, so we'll get that ready. So on the heading bug, we're going to spin this round, halfway around the compass, back to 75. You can see the small arrow over here as I roll the heading knob. It's coming back towards 80, 75. So when we come through this VOR station, we will switch away from VOR Lock to heading mode. So we'll wait till we get to a couple of miles away. Okay, so now we go to heading mode, and the aircraft will turn right to follow the heading marker. You can see that happening. The flight director arrows here, or lines, are saying I want you to give some right input. So there's two parts to an autopilot. I've mentioned this on previous videos. There's the flight director and the actual autopilot. So the flight director is looking at the route, or what you've instructed, and figuring out what the airplane needs to do. So the autopilot just blindly follows what the flight director tells it to do. So you can see at the moment it's telling you, I want you to go some left input please on the ailerons. So the autopilot's doing that, and then it's slackening it off to gently roll it back to level. So that's because we have got back to 75 degrees. You can see that happening. So we're going to get probably a climb warning in a moment, because there's... Oh, he's descending below us though. There's a Ryanair coming in fast behind us. So what we are going to do is fly out, and to give ourselves more time to think and talk about things, we're going to fly straight over this waypoint that I've marked on the map, and then circle round to the left to come in. So hopefully that'll make a bit more sense. So to prepare for our landing, knowing we are in heading mode now, we can go and prepare nav1, or the nav1 radio for the ILS. So 110.50 and 223 degrees. So 110.50, 0.50 and change the course to 223 degrees. Okay, so now we're ready. We can actually switch over to using nav1 already, and it will be indicated here. So relative to where we are, we would need to make a right turn to go in, and you can see that on the yellow arrow is the direction of the centre line of the runway. And we are to the left of it at the moment, which is absolutely true. Look, we are to the left of that yellow line. Okay. So we need to descend. I'd completely forgotten about that. Luckily we've got lots of time. So we'll come down to 3,000 feet. And we arm that so it won't fly straight through 3,000 feet. And the way we do this is, at the moment, the autopilot is just flying us along. We're trimmed out for 3,000 and for 7.5. So what we're going to do is move the trim. So I'm just trimming the elevators to achieve the descent rate I want. I'm going to come off the throttle while we're doing this as well. And then we'll say, oh no, we don't want that. We want heading mode, and we want vertical speed mode. Now we're accelerating because we're coming down quite steeply, so we're going to throw the air brakes out to stop ourselves from accelerating. So coming down to 6,000 feet. Five and a half thousand feet, and we're coming through the bottom of the cloud, which is great. So we'll be able to get some bearings on where we are out of the windscreen as well, which is really useful. So come off the air brake. So where are we on the map? Let's have a look. We're about to cross over that waypoint 1. So what we'll do is change the heading now to 90 degrees. So the aircraft is pulling out of the descent automatically because we're coming up to 3,000 feet. The sound we heard is we were within 900 feet of our target altitude. We accelerated a little because I've come off the air brake, but that will bleed back off now because we're levelling up. We'll just help it bleed back off in a bit more expeditious manner. Okay, so we are now flying a 90-degree track away, and we're going to spin around left to 223 degrees, okay? So we're going to continue moving this left. We're going to be careful not to go further than 180 degrees from the way we are pointing, otherwise the aircraft will start turning right. So I'm just moving this heading bug, but keeping it on the left side of the compass. If we go to the right side, the plane will turn right to get there because it will take the shortest route. So we're changing this to the runway direction, and we can come back off the throttles and decelerate as we make the turn. So that's 223 degrees. And if we go and have a look at the map, we're doing this nice big sweeping turn, and then we'll come in online to pick up this will start to make sense on the CDI, the course deviation indicator. So this will swing round and we'll be going in the same direction as the runway. And when we're fairly close to being on track for doing that, we will engage VOR Lock, which will make the aircraft fly towards the ILS signal instead of the heading. We will also engage Glideslope Lock. So when we get a bit closer, you will see this side of the CDI will wake up. It hasn't got it at the moment, we're too far away. Generally tends to be about 18 miles or so it will pick it up. So you can see we're actually getting fairly close to the track. We'll let it level out at 223. We're decelerating the whole time as well, on purpose. Okay, so we're going to switch over to VOR Lock.
Localizer arrived.
So what the aircraft is going to do now is stop following the heading and follow the nav radio. We now have the glide slope, we're close enough for that. So inside 20 miles, we've just about got glide slope. So we're going to go for Glideslope Lock as well.
Armed.
So what that means is when we get to the glide slope, so when the marker comes down to the middle of
Speed
the
checked below 205.
to the middle of the glide slope
Flaps 18.
gauge, the aircraft will start descending and follow the glide slope down to the ground. So you can see the airfields out in front of us. We're slowing, so we can go for first stage of flaps, which is what I talked over him. Unfortunately, the co-pilot just told us that. We're going to need to increase the thrust to maintain speed. And we're slowing down gently. We will get readouts from the co-pilots as well as we decelerate, asking for more flaps. So we're basically, if we go and look on the map, you'll be able to make sense of this now. We're just about coming in. We're quite a long way out still. So about 16 miles or so out. But you can see that on the instruments now, look, 15 miles. Ground speed's 164, 163, so we need to ease the throttles open. Just trying to arrest our deceleration, because as I'm continually moving the flaps down, I'm adding more thrust. Okay, so you should find fairly soon. So we are still flying along, remember, at 3,000 feet, as you can see on the altimeter. If you imagine there's a line through the sky, that we are below it at the moment, which is why this orange arrow is at the top of the glide slope gauge. There's a line through the sky that is a 3-degree line down to the runway apron at Stansted. When we get closer to that line, this will start moving. So let's look closer at it. Has it started moving yet? We're getting within the right sort of range. When we get to about 10 miles, 9 miles, you should see that start to come in. Here it comes. So when this is in the middle, it means we are on that line. We are below it at the moment. When this is in the middle, we will be on the line. So this is using VOR Lock on the autopilot, is steering us in a lateral, left to right, to keep us on the centre line. Glideslope Lock will kick in when the glide slope gets to the middle, and it will start descending and following it.
Descend.
That's
Descend.
TCAS again.
Climb, climb, climb,
See that he's right in front of us. You can see why it's saying climb.
climb, climb, climb,
Glide slope
climb,
captured.
climb.
Glide slope
climb,
captured. There we go. We're going to start
Establish
descending.
Climb, 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 climb,
So we'll ignore TCAS
climb,
and just
climb,
let the glide slope
climb,
do its job.
climb.
So we're going
climb,
to drop the
climb,
gear now
Climb, climb, climb,
and drop more
climb,
flaps.
climb, climb.
Okay. So we just need to use the throttle now to moderate our speed on approach. So we're holding steady at about 140 knots, which is fine.
2500.
That's the altimeter reading out the radar altitude. So above ground level, I should say. So So we're holding 140 knots, we've got 7 miles to run. We've got Glideslope Lock enabled and VOR Lock enabled. When we get to 200 feet above ground level, as a minimum, we will, you can see the radar altitude is here, look. When we get to 200 above ground level, we will switch off the autopilot and take over, because this aircraft does not have auto land, so it's up to us. Let's have a look outside while we've got a chance to do so. It's a gorgeous looking aeroplane, isn't it? As you can see, we've got full flaps, just cruising along 140 knots quite happily, and there's Stansted Airport out in front of us in the fields. Let's go back in the cockpit. We've just accelerated slightly, we're at 145, so I'm going to ease the throttles back gently. Just bleed off some of that speed. So remember, we're looking for 200 feet below the aircraft before we disable autopilot. Which I have a button mapped on my joystick, on the correct button to do it actually, to disable the autopilot. And we'll take over. So you can see the yoke is moving around gently, that's the autopilot doing that. So let's come back off the speed.
1,000.
It's coming down to our decision altitude. Obviously it's not a decision altitude today. Okay, there's some people messing around at Stansted by the look of it, so we'll ignore them. 500 feet. $400 feet. Should we take over at this point?
Disconnected.
So I'm in control. Bleed that speed off as we come in now. Dropped a little bit below the glide slope, but that's fine. And good visuals on the runway.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
Ground idle.
Not the smoothest landing, but serviceable. Okay, so wheel brakes. Take the high-speed exit.
80 knots. 60 knots.
And there we go, so flaps up, landing lights off, and now we can just taxi in. So that was the BAE 146 doing a radio navigation example flight around London City and Stansted in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and hopefully that kind of explains some of the basics of it. So we used the VOR Lock mode and the Glideslope Lock mode, and we also used a little bit of heading and used it just to navigate ourselves onto the Glideslope nicely. But yeah, the flying VORs, you know, using 2 nav radios and using the switch control in the 146 is absolutely brilliant, I think, and it makes it, you know, fun to fly. So there you go. Hopefully you found that interesting. And I'm obviously not going to record taxiing back and shutting everything down because it's very boring. But this was all about the radio navigation. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'll see you again soon. I'll stop recording there.